So, welcome to Mindfulness Monday, episode 6. And you will notice that this is not a live. This is actually a pre-recorded. It'll probably have captions on the bottom, just to make sure that you get captions. And it's pre-recorded because at the time I will be doing the live, I'm actually on a coaching retreat, and I wasn't sure what the internet was going to be like. So I thought I would do it now, give you the benefit of a nicely recorded video with some thoughts and captions, and not have to kind of endure that. Is the live going to work? Are we going to have the internet fail on us and all that kind of good stuff which goes with it? And for Mindfulness Monday episode 6, I want to talk to you about something called the beginner's mind. And the beginner's mind is something which you have these things which are kind of passed in front of you and things which are said to you, and you register them and you nod and go, yes, yes, yes. And then you don't think about them until they come back in again. And it was sent to me by one of my coaches, Chris, a long, long time ago. He talked about cultivating the beginner's mind. And I kind of nodded and went with it because it made perfect sense at the time. And then it drifted away and I forgot about it. But on the recent masters I've been doing, where we had Choden, who's my tutor, one of the people who teaches mindfulness as part of the MSc, ran a session and he talked about the beginner's mind. And it was that reticular activating system moment of, I've heard this before, pay attention. If it's repeated, it must be something worth knowing and something useful. And we were talking about it in the context of mindful eating. And we had a grape, or we had another piece of fruit, or the really clever people got chocolate. And we mindfully ate this piece of fruit, this piece of chocolate, this piece of food. And there was an invitation to, with most bits of food, you just whack it in your mouth and you swallow it and it's gone. But there was an invitation to actually start the whole process of eating food from using all your senses. Look at the food. Feel the food, feel the temperature, roll it around on your hand, feel as it changes. And, a grape in particular, not a grape, a raisin. I don't eat raisins very often. So for me, it was really quite cool to go back and look at raisins. Feel how they feel. Put it in your mouth, rub it against your lips, smell it, listen to it. There's so many different ways of looking at this. And it was an invitation to have a beginner's mind to eating that food. What if you'd never, ever eaten before? What if you'd never had that particular fruit before? What if you'd never, ever experienced what it was like to go through that process? What would it be like? Because when we look at things, we take so much for granted. When we look at food in the supermarket and we make an assumption about, well, I've had food similar to that before, so this food must be like it. Or when we look at people, we make an assumption because we've seen something before. Now, what if we were to approach all of this with a complete beginner's mind? What if we were to approach this from a place of, what if I'd never experienced this before? What would I look for? What questions would I ask? How would I approach it? How would I be as part of that process? And because I didn't realize the impact of that and the significance of that when Chris mentioned it to me 3 years ago, and when Choden mentioned it, the two came together and I went, okay, there is something in this. There's a real kind of slowing down. There's a real innocence in this approach. There's a real drive, not from a place of having to know everything and have all the answers. It's coming from a place of complete curiosity. And this morning I meditate, and I meditate quite a lot. And one of the apps that I use is the Calm app. And if you do a meditation with Calm, one of the great things it does is it gives you a little image when you finished it. And this was the image which came up this morning. And this is why it kind of piqued my interest and got me thinking about this subject today. I'll read it to you from Shunryu Suzuki. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. Let that sit with you for a moment. Even pause it at this point and read that. I'll take a screenshot, whatever works for you. In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the experts, there are few. And that kind of sings to me on many levels. It kind of, resonates with me on many, many levels. From this idea that, as a beginner, you don't know anything. If you have that, if you cultivate that curiosity and you ask lots of questions and you come at something not knowing anything, but really curious to learn more, you're not constrained by previous knowledge. You're not constrained by stuff which has gone before. But in that expert's minds, there are few possibilities. And in some ways, to me, when I first read that, it didn't make sense. It was like, hang on, if I'm an expert in something, I know everything about it. Why would I not see possibility? But actually, I think there's a tendency to believe as an expert that you have to have all the answers and you have to know things. And it reminded me of when I went for a job many years ago. I worked as a podiatrist and I worked on the NHS as a podiatrist. And I was a band 6 when I first qualified in 2007. And in 2009, I was lucky enough to interview for a band 7 job. So I got a team leader job. And I was reflecting on this, and I've talked about this with a few people recently, that I got this job as somebody with 0 experience as a team leader, 0 experience of working in that department. Not a huge amount of experience as managing people and being an expert or a specialist, but I had something which other people didn't. And the interview panel were brilliant. The other people who went for the job as well were brilliant, and there were mostly people who were internal. There was one other person who was external as well. And I went in there, interviewed, answered the questions, didn't necessarily expect to get the job. I was in that place where I was thinking, I don't have the experience for this. I'm kind of lucky I got an interview. I'm giving it a go and seeing what happens. And I remember leaving the interview and getting in the car and driving north out of Walsall, where it was, which is completely the opposite direction to where I live, and finding a gym and actually going to a gym and having a workout. And a couple of hours later, I get a phone call. And this phone call is, we'd like to offer you the job. And I was absolutely stoked. I was really, really excited by it. And in hindsight, and looking back on that experience and looking back on that whole process, I can see why I got the job. I was different to everyone else. I hadn't come through the podiatry route and was constrained by that podiatry way of thinking. I wasn't an expert in podiatry. I was a podiatrist. I trained. I'd done all the training. But I'd had a previous life before. My previous life had been nursing, and in particular A&E nursing. I'd already done a nursing diploma, 3 years worth of study. I had all these things in place. I'd seen things which other people who were interviewing for that job probably wouldn't have seen. And while I was a beginner in podiatry, I had experience from other areas, and I had the chance to see possibility and see how things would knit together. And that for me is really important. And there's a few things which I could invite you to think about with that. Think about your experience of wanting to have the answers to every question, of wanting to know everything. Because when you know things, and when people come to you and ask questions and you give them the answers, it feels good. It feels good to know stuff. It feels good to be able to answer people's questions and go, yes, this is the answer. But sometimes, in fact, more than sometimes, often it feels better to be able to turn around and go, I don't know, or let's find out together, or let's ask more questions. Let's go from the place of being a complete beginner. When I got the job as a band 7, I was a beginner as a team leader. I was lucky I'd got experience in other areas, but I was a beginner as a team leader, and I could see possibility in other ways of doing things. And my invitation to you today is to approach the things that you do today and tomorrow and the day after with a complete beginner's mind. Ask yourself, if this was the first time I was doing this, what would I look for? What would I ask? Who would I talk to? What would I do? And have some fun with that. Have some fun. But also look at your experience, look at what you've done over the years, and don't discount the experience that you have, even if it's from a completely different thing. Everything you've done has value and moves towards being useful for where you are in this moment and the stuff you move forward to in the future. So have a beginner's mind, be curious, ask questions, have a lot of fun with it. And let me know in the comments how you get on. Thanks for listening. See you later.